My best friend revealed the shocking truth about my cheating wife during the whole family gathering. To my wife, who has been my best friend and the love of my life since 10th grade, betrayed me. Now let me provide some background information. My wife and I started dating in high school, and I first met her when she was dating Tristan, who was also a central figure in this story. At that time, Tristan and I were decent friends, but not particularly close. However, once I met my wife, I quickly developed strong feelings for her throughout my entire freshman year. I hoped that she and Tristan would break up so that I could have a chance with her. Eventually, my wish came true. And in 10th grade, I became friends with her and asked her out. Our relationship was one of the highlights of my high school experience, and being with her helped me navigate through the challenges of those 4 years. Since Tristan and my wife had only dated when they were freshmen, he didn't seem bothered by the fact that I was now dating his ex. In fact, he even gave me his blessing when I asked if it was all right. By the time we reached senior year, Tristan and I had become close buddies, and there was no indication that he harbored any ill feelings towards me for dating his ex-girlfriend from freshman year. The three of us ended up attending the same local state college, and I maintained my relationship with my wife, while also nurturing my friendship with Tristan. However, there were moments when it was evident that Tristan was attracted to my wife. I would catch him staring at her during parties, and one of my other friends even disclosed that Tristan had expressed a desire to have closeness with my wife. While it bothered me, I understood that my wife is attractive, and it's natural for other guys, including my friends, to find her appealing. As long as they didn't make any advances, I didn't really mind. Nonetheless, it was clear that Tristan was strongly attracted to her. And throughout our years of friendship, he would occasionally make subtle comments about her looks, and how fortunate I was to be with her. Fast forward to this year. More than a decade later, my wife and I are now happily married with 2 wonderful children, a son and a daughter. Meanwhile, Tristan recently went through a tough divorce with his ex-wife, which took a toll on him and left him feeling deeply depressed. I wanted to be there for him emotionally. But unfortunately, the demands of my job and my own mental health struggles left me with very little time to spare. However, my wife stepped in and offered her support while he was going through his difficult time. Although they hadn't been particularly close since college, my wife disliked Tristan's womanizing tendencies. But after his divorce, and my wife being there for him, I noticed a definite change in their behavior towards each other. Whenever Tristan would come over to hang out with me, my wife would always sit next to him, laugh at his jokes, and even make an effort to ask when he would visit again. I noticed this happening, and it bothered me. But I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't want to seem possessive. Plus, I appreciated that Tristan had someone there for him when I couldn't be. The situation continued to the point where my wife would go to Tristan's house to hang out with him while I was at work. It reached a breaking point in September, and I finally spoke up and told my wife that I felt uncomfortable with the amount of time they were spending together. Instead of getting angry or calling me controlling, she apologized and acknowledged that she had gotten caught up in the friendship and promised to respect my boundaries. I mustered the courage to ask if she was attracted to Tristan, and she admitted that she did feel some attraction and that Tristan had flirted with her. However, she reassured me that nothing had ever happened between them. Learning this news broke my heart, and I told my wife that I didn't want her to hang out with Tristan anymore. She agreed and apologized for her actions. For the next couple of weeks, everything seemed fine, except that I started avoiding Tristan. At the beginning of this month, me and my wife had a huge fight about money problems. She's been struggling to find a job since the pandemic started to calm down. And even though there are plenty of job opportunities, she couldn't seem to get hired. My job alone wasn't enough to support our family of 4. So we were under a lot of financial stress. The argument escalated so much that she stormed out and didn't come back for several hours. I didn't ask where she went, but she looked disheveled and had a strange expression on her face. Despite all this, I didn't feel like talking to her. So I didn't question her about where she had been. Now, let's fast forward to Thanksgiving. We had invited my whole family and some friends, including Tristan, whom I hadn't spoken to in over a month. Everything was going well during dinner until someone brought up politics. Me and Tristan have completely opposing political views, with him being a hardcore Trump supporter and me being a liberal. Let's avoid arguing about politics in the comments, please. Normally we avoided talking about politics in our relationship, but for some reason, he seemed determined to discuss it that day. The conversation quickly turned heated, with personal attacks flying around. Tristan yelled at me, claiming that my liberalism was a sign of my weakness and inability to be a man. I asked him where he got that idea, and he replied that I couldn't even satisfy my wife. This completely shocked me. And the whole dinner table, as me and my wife never discussed our bed life in front of anyone. The rest of the dinner became awkward and filled with silence. After dinner, when everyone started leaving, I confronted my wife and Tristan. My wife looked down at the ground, while Tristan stared me in the eyes and admitted to sleeping with my wife. On November 4th, the same day we had our big fight, he said she came over seeking advice, and they ended up hugging with him making a move. He mentioned that she initially resisted and said it was wrong, but eventually gave in and they did it. Throughout this whole revelation, my wife remained silent and kept staring at the floor. Instead of feeling angry, I was just completely shocked and couldn't find the words to respond. After a few minutes of silence, Tristan simply left, and I was left alone with my wife. She broke down crying, saying it was the worst mistake of her life. She explained that the stress from my job taking care of our children, and my personal issues that made me distant, had made her feel unwanted. Tristan's attention and flirting made her feel good, and she gave in to the temptation. She told me that she had no intentions of doing anything with Tristan, even though he had hinted at wanting to sleep with her when they hung out. She said she was just seeking attention from him while I was absent. She admitted that it was a moment of weakness after our fight that led her to have any closeness with him. I angrily told her to leave me alone, and that I needed time to think. She went to her room, but later came down to try and talk and plead with me. Each time I yelled at her to get out of my sight. As I sit here writing this, I'm completely devastated. I've never felt such intense pain before. The aftermath of this revelation was like walking through a minefield. I was angry more than angry. I was furious, seething with a rage that was as potent as it was raw, not just to Tristan, but at my wife, too. I had trusted her, trusted them both, and they had taken that trust and shattered it. Determined to take control of the situation, I decided it was time for the truth to be aired. If my parents knew about my wife's infidelity, then it was only fair that her parents did too. They were always fond of me, and they never really liked Tristan. They were shocked when I told them they couldn't believe their perfect daughter was capable of such deceit. Then there were our friends. The news spread like wildfire through our circle. The perfect couple. The high school sweethearts had a crack in their perfect facade. It felt like a public execution. My wife was furious with me, accusing me of ruining her image, but I couldn't care less. I was done playing the dutiful husband, protecting her reputation while she destroyed mine. The news reached Tristan's ex-wife too. She reached out to me with a proposition that was as shocking as it was tempting. She offered to help me get revenge on Tristan. She still hated him. Her divorce was proof of that. She unveiled a secret that Tristan had been hiding. He had committed financial fraud at his firm. His ex-wife had the evidence, and she was willing to let me expose him. We did it. We handed over the documents to the police and everything snowballed from there. Tristan lost everything: his job, his friends, and his freedom. Seeing Tristan in court was tough. He didn't look like himself anymore. The lively and charming guy was replaced by a man who looked way older than he was, tired and beaten. He had brought this upon himself, and while a part of me was glad to see him pay, another part of me pity him. He had wrecked my life, and now his life was in ruins. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, a shock to everyone. My wife called me in hysterics, branding me a moron and a vindictive man. She was desperate to go back to Tristan, but now that was impossible. He was in jail. A part of me reveled in her misery. It was a small consolation for the pain she had caused me. In the end, the man who had everything lost it all because he coveted what wasn't his. My wife, who had been unfaithful, was now alone, hated by her parents, shamed by her friends, and abandoned by her lover. I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage and a broken heart. But I was firm. I would not let this betrayal define me. I had taken control of the situation, revealed the truth, and meted out justice. My heart was still broken, but I was resolute. I would not let them when they had tried to break me, but they'd only made me stronger. I would move on and they would heal, not for them but for myself, for my children, and for the man I knew I was.